All right, all right, all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome so much to our little talk that we're going to have today about, financing your studies in the U.S. or Canada. I'll introduce myself first, and I'll let my friend here introduce herself. My name is Ryan Hipgrave, and I'm the International Recruitment Officer for Glendon Campus of York University in beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ryan. My name is Ana Luisa Teodoro, and I'm the International Recruitment Specialist at St. Francis College, located in Brooklyn Heights, New York.
Wicked. Okay, so before we get going, this is just sort of just give you a breakdown of how we're gonna do this. Okay, so we did a bit of a virtual coin toss between Ana Luisa and myself, and I pulled heads, so I'm gonna go first. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna talk to you in general about sort of scholarships and financing and supporting your studies in Canada, and then Ana Luisa is gonna talk about that in the United States because there are some significant differences between the two and how it works. And then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about our individual institutions and just like the great things about them. In the meantime, though, if you have any questions, if you think of any questions, please go to the Q&A function of this webinar here and type in your question at any time. Okay, so we will get to the questions at the end of the presentations, but we just want to make sure that you don't forget your questions. So if you do think of something, just write it in the Q&A and we'll get to it at the end. But for now, let's sort of get into the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about today. I'm going to share my screen. I hope this works. It worked before. Let's see if it works again. I'm also dealing with kind of a new computer too, so I'm a little shaky, but I think we'll get there. Okay, so Ana Luisa, can you give me a thumbs up if it's the full screen and not like the full screen with the lecture notes?
It's doing the lecture notes, Ryan.
It is? Okay. All right. Good times. How about now?
Now it's in full screen and you're set to go.
Yes. All right. Okay. Good stuff. Victory. Okay. So what we're going to talk about right now is financing your studies in Canada, our post-secondary institutions, and how you may be able to afford them. And once again, my name is Ryan. Please just call me Ryan. Okay. So post-secondary schools in Canada. What do you need to know about them first? Because there are some differences when you talk about post-secondary institutions in Canada versus the US and versus other countries. Every country and its institutions have a little bit of its different quirks and all that kind of stuff. So what are we talking about here when we talk about post-secondary schools in Canada? So when we say university, what do we mean? Typically, a university in Canada is an institution that offers a 3 or 4 year bachelor's degree program, honors or non-honors, master's degrees, PhDs, and postdoctoral fellowships. So these are research institutions, okay? They can also include professional schools as well, such as a law school, a business school, a medical school, dental school, that type of thing. Those typically tend to be affiliated with a institution, with a university. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a university. And this is where sort of the US and Canada differs, because in the US, you tend to say college, and it's sort of a generic term to mean, a place that you go after high school. In Canada, we don't use that term to go to university. So when we say college, what do we mean? Well, we mean something very specific. Colleges in Canada are always referred to as 1, 2, or 3 year diplomas in trades or career specific programs. So whereas a university, you may get a bachelor's degree in history or a bachelor's of science in molecular biology. Whereas at a college, you would get a diploma, or in the United States, it would be called an associate's degree, which is either 1, 2, or 3 years in something more specific, like electrician or a public relations consultant. It would be something that's very, very, very specific and very much career driven. So it's typically a diploma that then allows you to do a certain sort of profession, right? A certain function. So there is definitely a difference in Canada when you're talking about a university versus discussing a college. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. 99% of all Canadian post-secondary institutions, that includes universities and colleges, are public. So they are not private, they're not for profit, they are public, and they are not for profit. So what does that mean, public? It means funding comes from both the federal and provincial governments. So I don't know how much you know about Canada, but we are not a unitary state. The United States has states, Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. And funding for our post-secondary institutions at the university and college level mostly comes from the federal government and also the provincial governments. But where do they get their money for that? Well, that funding ultimately comes from the Canadian taxpayers. And that has some impact on tuition, and I'm going to explain that in a further slide. Publicly funded, though, in the meantime, means it's a commitment to quality. So we have in Canada, we have extremely vigorous nationalized and province-wide regulations in terms of accrediting our public institutions, our universities and colleges. So what that means is it means that, and this is something that kind of shocks people when I say this, but, because it's so standardized in Canada, all Canadian universities and colleges are really good. We have a very, very high, consistently high quality of education in Canada. So when you're talking about universities in Canada, I don't like to talk to students about, well, this university is better than this one and blah, blah, blah. I don't like to do those comparisons. What I really like to make sure the student knows, make sure you know, is that you want to be looking at what university or college is right for you. What program do they offer? Where are they located? Are they in a big city, a smaller city, that type of thing, right? So I'll get more into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to get that idea in your head first, that our publicly funded institutions are quite regulated, are very strictly accredited. And also because of that high quality, they're very internationally recognized. So a degree in Canada actually has a lot of value internationally, which is fantastic. Most of our institutions are found in or close to large population centers. So, Canada is a very big country in terms of land mass, right? But it's also pretty sparsely populated. We have about 38 million people in a country that is a massive land mass, larger than the United States. The only country that's larger than us is Russia. So you're talking about, most of the country sort of being kind of empty, actually. Most of the habitable part, though, is within about 150 miles or kilometers of the U.S. border. So the concentration of our population is very much along the southern border towards the United States. And so that's where you find most people, that's where you find most cities, and therefore that's where you find most university and colleges. I'm not saying that that's all the case, that there are lots of smaller colleges and universities that are located in smaller towns, in more rural settings, and that type of thing. But it tends to be that especially our larger institutions tend to be found in the larger cities like, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Ottawa, that type of thing. Most universities and colleges in Canada boast a sizable international student population. So we love our international students. And it's actually fairly easy for an international student to come and study in Canada in terms of immigration. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But what does that mean? It means that if you're an international student coming to a university in Canada, you're not alone. Okay, you're not going to be the one international student in your class or in your program. Chances are you're going to be among many. And especially in our larger institutions, you will often find that there are student clubs, not only for specific countries. So like we have at my university, we have the, like the Guyanese Students Association of York University. So you can find not only people who have come from that part of the world and studied here directly, but you will also find students who were born in Canada, but their families, maybe their parents, their grandparents come from that country or come from that cultural community. So when you come to study in Canada as an international student, you're definitely not alone in many ways. International students tend to live on campus but are not required to, whereas inversely, most domestic students in Canada don't live on campus, which is very, very interesting. So you'll find in other countries that, there are universities and colleges where the majority of the population of that school lives on campus, and sometimes they're even required to, at least in the first, 1 or 2 years. In Canada, in our universities, that's actually not the case. And as I said before, most of our universities are concentrated in large population centers, which means many students either live at home and study and commute to school, or they live in their own apartment, depending on the cost of living in that city, or they live with some roommates or that type of thing. But a lot of international students and some domestic students, certainly, especially ones from other provinces, because I said Canada is a very large country, that they would live in residence. I actually lived in residence myself, and I thought it was a phenomenal for my first 2 years, and it was really the best way to become involved in the university community, and I strongly encourage it. Also, depending on where you're located or where the school is located, it can actually be a lot less expensive. So, for example, in Toronto, the cost of living is actually quite high off campus, but on campus, the cost of living is actually pretty reasonable, and I will get to costs later on. So it can be economically advantageous, whereas in some other maybe smaller towns in more sort of far out areas of Canada, the inverse can be true. So that's another thing that you want to sort of research, but it's not a requirement for most places. Okay, so let's get down into brass tacks here. The cost of studying in Canada, how fees are structured, and what they cost. So this can get into a little complicated, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to simplify it for you as much as I possibly could. Because our universities are taxpayer funded, there are 2 tiers of fees. Citizens and landed immigrants, because they pay taxes in Canada, pay domestic fees, which are significantly lower. However, international students whose family and parents and themselves have not come from Canada and have not been paying taxes to fund our universities, they pay international fees. Okay, so this is how a public education system works in Canada. A domestic student pays a low tuition, an international student pays a higher tuition fee because of that taxpayer status. Okay, note, a student visa does not make you a landed immigrant. So a student visa is a temporary visa. It's not a permanent visa. There are avenues to become a permanent resident, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. But because you have a student visa, it does not make you a landed immigrant. You are still considered an international student unless you become a permanent resident, which would happen after graduation and can happen after graduation. Tuition is broken down on a per credit basis. So it's not a one fee fits all type of thing. Every credit you take, you pay for that credit. So in general, a full-time academic year is 30 credits. That's 15 credits a semester, which in general works out to about 5 courses per semester. So you're paying by the credits. So the less credits you take, the less money that you're spending in tuition, or the inverse is true, right? Now, international students must remain full-time students during the course of their studies. They cannot go down to part-time. And that means you have to be doing 12 credits or more. So you can do 12 credits, you can do 15 credits per semester, and there will be a cost variance there, but you are charged per credit. On-campus housing is a separate expense, and it's usually a separate application. So because you apply to a university in Canada does not mean that you automatically have applied to housing. You actually have to apply to on-campus housing separately, and it's a separate fee. For the most part, undergraduate residences also require a meal plan, so you would have to choose a meal plan, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Other fees can include textbooks, student activity fees, and we also have mandatory health insurance. We have a publicly funded healthcare system in Canada that's managed by each province, and so we do require international students to have health insurance upon arrival in Canada. They are not eligible for the government program, so we offer private insurance. However, it's actually fairly inexpensive, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So tuition and fees, let's talk about actual costs, okay? So depending on the university and depending on the program, you're looking at between $18,000 and $35,000 per year, depending on the university and program. So some universities are more expensive than others, and also some programs are more expensive than others. For example, an engineering program or a Bachelor of Business Administration program is going to be more expensive tuition-wise than a Bachelor of Science, than a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, or a theater degree, or something else, right? So those sort of highly technical, very, very sort of professionally minded bachelor's degree programs are going to be on the higher end. And then the more general sort of Bachelor of Arts, liberal arts education programs are going to be a little bit less. And also it depends on the location in Canada too. Housing. So for a bed in a residence, you're looking at between $5,000 and $11,000 per year, depending on accommodation. So it depends on the university, but it also depends. Is it in a shared room of 2 students? Is it a private room? Is it in a student suite where there's 5 separate rooms and then a kitchen in the middle, that type of thing? So there's a lot of variance in that. And those fees are set by the universities, regulated by the government. And also there is no difference in housing costs between domestic and international students. So the only time you're paying a higher cost than a domestic student is when it comes to tuition and health insurance. Everything else, it's the same. So if a student that comes from Vancouver has a single room, they're paying the exact same amount of money that a student from Belgium will pay for that room. That's where the costs start to equal out. Food, as I said, most undergraduate residences require you to have a meal plan, and they are typically between $3,000 and $6,000 per year, depending on the school and depending on the plan, and also depending on your appetite. So at my institution, they range between $3,000 and $5,500. If you don't eat much, the $3,000 one is fine. If you're a big eater like me, you might want to go with the platinum plan. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Textbooks, this is a real big one because a lot of people always ask, how much are the textbooks? Well, it's a big fat, it depends, okay? So I was a political science student, which was mostly just small books. It was political theory books. It wasn't huge textbooks. So I didn't actually have to spend a lot of money, and I could also get a lot of my books on Amazon, on Kindle. So it was really cheap. And a lot of older books, especially, they're rights free, so they cost a couple of bucks. So you can spend as little as $200 on books for the year, or you could spend as much as $1,500 per year. It really depends on the program, but it also depends on the professor, because you can have 3 different professors teaching the same class, and one of them is very textbook heavy. He or she wants you to spend a lot of money on these thick textbooks, right? Because they're a more traditional teacher. Whereas somebody else might say, well, you can get all this stuff online, and here's some journals and articles and all that kind of stuff. So you always want to look at, what your budget is and what program you're looking at. And also, once you get down to choosing classes, which professor, is the one that maybe isn't putting you on the hook for as much in terms of textbook cost. And insurance, as I said, health insurance is mandatory, which is approximately $1,000 per year. And that includes emergency health and dental and regular checkups and stuff. So that's actually really inexpensive for full coverage health insurance. At my university, it's about $960. So it's not bad at all. And I'm talking about dollar figures, so I want you to remember to convert, right? Because if you're based in the UK, well, the Canadian dollar is a British pound is 1.73 Canadian dollars, and then the euro is 1.53 Canadian dollars. So all of those fees that I was telling you about, those are in Canadian dollars. So you got to convert it into your head. So it's actually less, right? So it's not 40,000 euros for a year. It's 40,000 Canadian dollars, which is about 26,000 euros for a full year. And that includes tuition, books, housing, fees, all that kind of stuff, right? So you always want to remember that when you're talking about another country, that you're converting the totals in your head. Okay, so let's talk about scholarships. It can be a little bit complicated. The first thing I want to say, just to manage your expectations, in Canada, there is no such thing as a full ride scholarship. Okay, we unfortunately do not have full ride scholarships. Not even Canadian students or star athletes receive free university degrees. Most universities offer an automatic entrance scholarship that starts at $1,000 and can go up. And this is depending on your high school average or the average of the school you're coming from. The higher the average, the higher the scholarship amount. There are many other scholarships available, but you have to find them and apply for them. And nearly all scholarships for international students do not take into account financial need as they do for domestic students. Academic merit is the most prominent determining factor. You do not need to wait for an offer of admission to apply for scholarships. In fact, you really should not do that. Depending on university, faculty, and program, you could be entitled to other automatic funds. Check your home country's financial aid programs to see if they'll fund your studies, at least in part. Let's talk briefly about the Canadian student visa. I cannot get into too many specifics because actually the Canadian government regulates who can and who can't advise people on immigration issues. I am not a licensed immigration advisor, so this is all I can really tell you. The Canadian student visa is easy to apply for, inexpensive, and relatively quick to obtain. You do not need an offer of admission in order to apply for the visa. You are allowed to work up to 20 hours per week during the school year, more in the summer. You can work on or off campus. Most students' jobs pay $15 an hour or more, depending on location and work involved. You are allowed to apply for a post-graduation extension of up to 3 years to work full-time after graduating. And one last thing, okay, I just kind of went out of there, but one last thing I wanted to say is students in a French bac or international bac or AP program can receive up to 1 year of advanced standing, thus saving even more tuition money. So that's sort of how the landscape is in Canada. And remember, if you have any follow-up questions, please put it in the Q&A. And I'm now going to turn it over to Ana Luisa.
Couldn't find the button to unmute myself. Thank you, Ryan. Great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. Students, I want to reiterate that is for Canada. Ryan did an absolutely amazing job explaining what is not necessarily the application process, more so what are the costs and scholarship things associated with that. Now we're going to move over into a U.S. perspective on this regard. I do want to kind of highlight again, any questions, any comments, anything that you have, write them in the chat. We're going to answer it at the end. But again, we don't want you to forget what your questions are. So with that being said, I'm going to open up my presentation to see essentially life in the US, studying in that regard. I do want everybody to keep in mind before we start this, I speak for St. Francis College. We're going to go into details on an overview part, but I do highly, highly, highly suggest for every single one of you on this fair to go to the booths of universities that you're interested in, because while both of us are, one, representing our own universities and speaking on behalf of our nations, of our communities and things like that, certain colleges might have certain details that are not applicable to all. So just want to reiterate that, have that shared. With that being said, let's open this up to St. Francis College and scholarships and beyond in the US. And let me open this up. Give me just a second. Can everybody see this? Ryan, is this all good?
It is very much all good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So once again, Ana Luisa Teodoro from St. Francis College. We're going to talk a little about scholarships and also beyond that of what is financing your education and what does this look like in a US perspective and also specifically in New York. So a small overview when we're studying in the United States works a little bit differently than Canada in terms of visa and things that you have to prove. I like to go over this a little bit at first before we go into scholarship opportunities and things like that, just to get a general idea of one, what are expected costs that automatically when you're submitting applications that you should keep in mind, and additionally, how to budget yourself. I think one of the key things to take away from this presentation is budgeting is very, very important. Studying internationally is expensive. I like to say this not to discourage you, but also to present a realistic picture of just essentially the process that you're getting yourselves into that we're going to be helping you out on. But in sum, international students coming to study in the US requires an F1 student visa. We call it an F1 student visa, and it's just those letters and numbers just kind of designate different categories, but essentially it is a student visa. Anybody who is a citizen of another country and does not have citizenship in the United States, meaning you don't have any dual citizenship, in the US, it requires an F1 student visa. We're talking right now in Europe and different areas like that. If you do not have citizenship in the US, you will require an F1 student visa. How to go about this and how to obtain one is granted a little bit outside of the scope of scholarshiping at the moment, but to go over it simply, you apply to a school, you gain acceptance into a school, the designated school official or DSO will supply you with something called an I-20. We'll go over what that means in this minute. And then you will, after you've received that I-20 and provided bank statements to prove cost of living in the US, you'll be able to set up an appointment with your embassy. Now, if anybody has any questions about what to do in light of COVID-19 and embassy closures, you can definitely come and speak to me personally in regards to that. We have plans set up. But in sum, of studying within the United States, one, requires a visa, and two, requires proof of funds. What we mean by proof of funds is, I kind of describe it as a security blanket for students. It's the United States government does not want to ever put students in the position of coming to study in the US and not have funds to support themselves. We want to make sure that either you, a family member, or just somebody who is sponsoring you, whether it be somebody who will legitimately be affording, helping you pay through your costs, or it's kind of just proof of funds to show somewhere, somebody in this world will be able to help you through school. I want to make this very, very clear. With the I-20 proof of funds, it's a paperwork, it's a form that you fill out. No one is required to pay that amount. It is a fund as like kind of a security blanket, but no one at any point, no matter what US institution that you are applying to, will take funds from whoever is on that sponsor form. A lot of students sometimes have questions of what we need it for. It's just to make sure that you will be able, theoretically, to support yourselves within the United States. So that's kind of the before looking at scholarshiping offers. You're given an admittance into the school, you follow up with I-20 proof of funds. Some fees to consider. I know Ryan said a little bit about Canada, about tuition, housing. It's the same thing within the US. You have to consider tuition, you have to consider housing, books, travel, health insurance. While health insurance for international students at our university at this point is mandatory, some schools have a little bit more flexibility with that. It is my utmost recommendation that regardless of where you are studying, you get international health insurance as a student. At US institutions, my university is partnered with one organization that offers health insurance at a severely discounted rate, or you are more than eligible to apply for your own student health insurance outside, as long as you are covered. And we say this not to try to take more money from you, but we say this to make sure that you are safe. If you get sick, if you have a cold, if you need medication, the health insurance is to, one, make sure that you're able to see a doctor, and secondly, any health-related costs are going to be covered or offered at a significantly discounted rate. Health insurance is usually cost on a US price point between $100 to $200, I think, for one flat rate of covering several months. It does depend on what plan you sign up for. If you're somebody with pre-existing health conditions, some plans might be a little bit more. So these are just some fees and things to consider. Tuition, I see there's a small typo, forgive me. Tuition's costs vary on institution type, not a major in US institutions. So what this means is that universities on an undergraduate, we're not going to go into graduate programs function a little bit differently, but for an undergraduate degree, the university usually has a flat tuition rate that does not change per major. All the thing that it depends is how many years you're at school. An undergraduate degree, typically it takes around 4 years. Sometimes I extend it to 5, depending on just what a student is doing with their life, if they take a gap year, et cetera, but it's usually 4 years of tuition that is being cost. And what reduces that cost is scholarshiping and awards. We'll go into that in a second, but just know tuition is one cost. Housing, books, travel, and et cetera are completely other costs that can change based on where you live in the world, your living style, what classes, and things to consider. Another note, and this is applicable to almost every university that I can think of, is pre-costs for admissions. Before you get admitted to a school, you obviously have to provide materials. You have to submit transcripts and things like that. If you are from a country where English is not the primary language spoken, if your documents are not in English, additionally, if you are not from an international high school, you most likely will have to have your transcripts translated and evaluated. What we mean by that is that it has to be translated into English, whatever school that you're applying for, the functioning language of that school. So for US institutions, in English. When we say by evaluated, it means your transcripts should be in a US point system. 2 different things, translated into English, and one is translated into the point system that we use. Now, some universities, depending on the region that you're applying from, might accept a document that's in English, but not necessarily evaluated. What I recommend is reaching out to the admissions team at your school, wherever you're applying to, whoever your contact is on that team, and ask them. I know for me, we usually accept transcripts if they're from European universities or European high schools as long as they're in English. And on a case-by-case basis, we might ask for them to evaluate if grades are not necessarily clear. So the most important thing is translated, evaluated transcripts are costs coming in. Additionally, if you do not speak English, you will have to do a proof of English proficiency exam. That is in the form of a TOEFL, an IELTS, a PTE. I personally highly recommend a Duolingo English proficiency exam. You can take them online. They're at a significantly reduced cost as opposed to maybe a TOEFL, where appointments right now are a little bit hard to get. Just to prove if you're from a country that does not speak English, or if maybe the university that you're applying to provides informal English evaluation. St. Francis College does, but we do prefer proof of English proficiency. So before you apply, specifically know that you are going to have to put up some costs up front. One really good news about all of this is that it's applicable to multiple universities. So just because you do your translation evaluation for, hopefully, St. Francis College does not mean you can use it for other schools. You absolutely can. You can use all of these forms. So it's kind of, I like to say, like a startup cost or a startup fee that it's going to be applicable to all the different universities that you send, and they also last for a while. Translated and evaluated transcripts usually do not expire a time frame between 5 and 6 years, depending on the agency that you use. So these credits or this evaluations are valid for a significantly long time, especially if you want to pursue a secondary degree like a graduate degree. But also some tips of how to go about this. First of all, one, check in with your admissions team. Whoever that you're submitting your application to, just send them a message. Ask them what you need. You take anything away from this presentation is always ask. I know Marco has heard me say this probably on a few different things on different presentations, but you do not get anything unless you ask for it. Do not be shy. You are your biggest advocate. If you have a question, ask. If you want scholarship, ask. There's truly nothing that cannot be solved by not asking the right question, by asking the right question. That's a little bit of a backwards turn of phrase there. Also, small note, fee waivers. To apply for St. Francis College is free to submit an application. Other universities are not. Some schools, some private universities do require paying a fee. Ask if you maybe can get a fee waiver. Sometimes the College Board replies them. Sometimes if you apply early, an early action decision, you might get a fee waiver, things like that. Take in consideration what is going on with the university you're applying to. It's not a one size fits all. There are general rules, but each institution kind of has their own way of how they do things. So that's a little bit of overview coming in. Now, some international students in the US factors to consider. Are you an undergraduate or are you a graduate student? What I mean by that, are you coming in straight from high school pursuing a bachelor's degree, or have you already completed a bachelor's degree and you're going for a master's? Or even a PhD, because graduate students are also in the PhD format, but I don't think we have any PhD students on this call right now. Regardless, depending on student type, you are eligible for different things. Scholarshiping for undergraduate students may not be available for graduate students. For the most part, internal. And what I mean by internal is scholarshiping that the institution provides to the student. So something like a merit-based, based on your GPA and things like that, are more available to undergraduate students as opposed to graduate students. But for grad students, what is more available to you guys is external scholarshiping. So if you are doing research-based, something called the Fulbright Scholarship is a very good thing to consider if you are a graduate student looking to study at external universities. But for undergraduates, a big portion of scholarshiping and funding comes from the institution itself. There are other private ones, external, and we'll go into that in just a second, but just note, different types of students are eligible for different things. Dates and deadlines. Do not forget your materials. All applications and all scholarships, for the most part, have deadlines. St. Francis College is a rolling admission school, meaning that we don't have a deadline of when you can apply. You can apply truly at any point throughout the year, but we do set up hard and soft deadlines in terms of when you can start. So for example, our spring term started yesterday. Not the best idea to submit an application today. So just take into consideration dated deadlines for one, applications, and two, scholarshiping, and also know what materials you need to provide. Also, best practice, don't write an essay the night before it's due. Give yourself about a week or two just to prepare yourself for those materials that ultimately are going to set you up for a really good foundation of obtaining scholarshiping to help finance your education. Also, another very, very big note, if everybody could write this down somewhere, a sticky note, a notepad, maybe on your hand, I don't know. But regardless, what is your budget? Scholarships are supplementary. They should not cover your tuition or housing or anything else entirely. You should be expected, or you should expect, to at least put some kind of funding forward to help finance your education. While they're in the US, there are some options for full tuition scholarship. They are competitive, obviously. They are competitive scholarshiping. Two, for the most part, they do not cover housing. Additionally, you still have other costs associated with. You have to think of plane travel, proof of funds for I-20. You have to consider books and tuition, costs of living in different countries and different states that you're working with. Scholarships are to supplement your education, not to cover it. So I do encourage, if maybe your financial situation is a little bit difficult, to sit down and come up with a realistic budget. I don't think it's best practice to ever go to a school to apply and just say, hey, I need my education fully funded. Not that it won't go well for you, there's just not a lot of options for that. And to set yourself up for the best success, consider what is your budget and what is too much of education excuse me, not education, too much tuition costs for you to be able to put towards your education, and what is within your budget that you realistically can afford for 4 years. Remember, it's not just 1 year, it's not one time, this is usually 4 to 5 years of education that you have to keep in mind. But also resources. Keep in touch with your admissions team. Also, look to see what external scholarships are available. The College Board, if you just Google, and I do tell all my students, a simple Google search will also help. Look up on the College Board as one resource for you to look to see what funding is there. An organization called NAFSA is really, really good in order to help funding. The National Association for International Students is also a really good source of funding, and also private and public scholarshiping. What I mean by that is the same thing that Ryan had mentioned earlier. See what options that your country of citizenship has for students. I know some European countries do have some funding and do have some organizations that help students who are interested in studying internationally. I recently have one student, she's not from Europe, I believe she's from the DR, but she was able to reach out to her local Ministry of Education and was able to get funding to help cover her housing. So see what options are available. You are your biggest advocate. Ask questions, see what's available, and also remember, scholarships are to supplement your education, not to cover it entirely. Also, again, some eligibility. International students in the US are eligible for merit-based scholarships. What we mean by merit-based is based on your GPA, your grades on your transcripts. Depending on your grades, you might receive lower or higher merit-based scholarships. 2, international student scholarships. Some institution, like St. Francis College, provides scholarshiping simply because you are an international student, and we do know that it is expensive for you all to set up all these things. Athletic scholarships. Now, this is another thing too of what I mean by athletic is to be realistic into what kind of student you are. While athletic scholarships are available, for the most part, it is athletics, meaning the athletics team, not the admissions team, that determines athletic scholarshiping. And additionally, it's mostly coaches. So if you are recruited by a school, if you have a coach that you are working with, depending on the school, and also depending on what division of sports they play, for plays tennis recreationally on the weekends, as opposed to somebody who's been practicing tennis on a team since they were 4 years old. Know what your sports level is, and don't kind of assume that just because you have an interest in a sport, that an athletic scholarship will be available to you. Also, competitions. Any type of essay competition that a school provides, look to see, one, if you are eligible for it. Again, undergraduate students might be eligible for certain competitions. Graduate students mostly are excluded from this, but keep in mind that what competitions are available, and 1, depending on your student type as an undergraduate student, if you're available for it, and 2, if international students are eligible to participate. Always ask. There's always an email attached somewhere. Always forward a link to an admissions team, an admissions representative, and they will help you out. I know for me, I'll have my contact information at the end. Always ask me questions. I love questions. They're my favorite thing. And again, aid from the country of citizenship in some cases. Not all countries do this, but it does not hurt to ask. International students very, very clearly are ineligible, meaning you do not, it is not applicable to you to get financial aid or government aid from the US. Unless you are a dual citizen. If you are a student, if you have citizenship with solely in another country, governmental aid from the US is not an option for you. So some things to keep in mind. Now, we're going to go over a little bit more of just specifically on St. Francis College and things to consider for, 1, how this applies to other US institutions and kind of where price points and model stands in that regard. Oh, before I do that, I'm sorry, I had another slide here of financing education and options. I know Ryan had mentioned working on campus and things like that. I just also, on a US perspective, functions a little bit differently. Just very big note, while you are on an F1 student visa, which is the student visa that all international students who have citizenship in another country need in order to study here, you are ineligible, you are not eligible to work outside of campus during their first year. Off-campus employments are within limitations. you are automatically eligible as soon as you enroll to work on campus, part-time. There's an hour limit for work on campus for all international students. Usually part-time is about 15 to 18 hours a week. I like to make this very clear. Your part-time job is not going to finance your education entirely. Again, along with scholarshiping, this is to supplement. Your part-time job is to gain experience and also to maybe do some miscellaneous expenses, to maybe help cover food or books. Working on campus is not going to finance your college degree, and that is for all US institutions. Additionally, work study, not an option. You can't exchange working on campus in order to cover some classes. Doesn't work like that. It's a job like any other. It's just simply you're allowed to do so on campus. Keep in mind, you are not the only student applying for jobs on campus. There are a lot of international students that are applying, as well as domestic students. So just keep also in mind the realistic expectation that it typically takes international students about a year in order for them to get employment on campus. It's like any job, you have to make connections, submit a resume, talk to different professors and departments. So just know that if you're kind of banking on the idea of immediately coming in and starting to work, might not be a realistic option for you. After you have been studying for 1 year, so you've completed your freshman year or your first full year at school, you have some other options. You have something called CPT, Curricular Practical Training. So this is for off-campus training, work, or internships that if you have something that is related to your degree. So for example, if you're a business major, or let's do accounting, I think that works a little bit better. If you're an accounting major and you found a paid internship off campus at an accounting firm, that would be something that applies for CPT. But if you're an accounting major and you say, hey, I found an off-campus job at an art studio, it's not related to your major, so that one won't be approved. So, and this is all stuff that works out once you're a current student. There's also OPT, which is optional practical training. That allows you to work 1 year post-graduation or pre-completion. It depends essentially just where you're at within the cycle, but usually it's 1 year post-graduation. You are eligible to work within the US and extend your visa. There's also 3-year extension if you're a student within the STEM fields. So like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are eligible for a 3-year extension. There's also one other option that's less used, but it's called proof of severe economic hardship. I do like to tell students, it's very hard to prove this. It's not impossible, but it is hard to prove severe economic hardship, meaning that you have to go through some paperwork, get approval from the DSO, and go through kind of a back and forth. It usually takes a few months if you're a student who's experiencing severe economic hardship to prove that, hey, I am continuing school and I need a job to continuously financing my education. Once again, this is on a case-by-case basis. You should never go to a school with the assumption that you're automatically going to get severe economic hardship. And usually, you most likely won't be able to go through the admission cycle without having to prove at least something for the I-20. Additionally, costs of proof of funds prior to coming to a US institution depend by state. So unlike Canada, where things are dependent on different provinces and things like that, in the US, different states have different costs of living. So for example, the proof of I-20 in Oklahoma, which is within our Midwest in the US, is different than proving in Miami and Florida. So just think of things like that of what are costs and expectations for me to do prior to me coming into the school, and also what is the realistic reality for me of financing my education. That being said, I'm going to go just very, very briefly into some scholarshiping that we have available, and then I'll pass it off to Ryan, talk a little bit about his institution, and I'll talk about St. Francis a little bit. We do have scholarships automatically for international students at our university. Once again, this is not applicable for all US institutions. This is for St. Francis College. Automatically, when you apply as an international student, if you do not have dual citizenship, you get something called a 6,500 International Merit-Based Scholarship. That is automatically given to you, and then based on your GPA, it's either 7,500 or 3,500, depending if you're a B student and above or a B and below. So on average, international students at St. Francis College, just with this straight tuition, pay between $13,000 and $17,000 in tuition per year, not per term. So that's just some automatically coming in. You don't have to apply, write any essay. That's just what we give you. Additionally, we have 2 other scholarships, which is a partial tuition scholarship. I'll go into this a little bit in detail later after Ryan explains a little bit more about his university. But essentially, we have a partial tuition scholarship available. The deadline for this one has passed, but some some extensions might be made. But this is essentially either half of $13,000 or $17,000 that's given to students upon being awarded this after completing an essay competition. Or we also have a presidential scholarship. Again, possible extensions for this one, but this one is a full tuition scholarship. That's 4 international students and 4 domestic students are chosen per year. But again, details to apply are on our website. If you do want to talk about this a little bit more, come to the booth and I can explain it further. That being said, some contact information, we can go over this a little bit more, but I do want to give the floor to Ryan to speak a little bit about his institution and things to kind of expect. So Ryan, all you.
Thanks so much, Annalise. And if you could just stay unmuted for a second, just to let me know that my screen sharing is going to be all right. Okay.
Of course.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So let's see here. How's that looking?
I'm seeing notes.
You are? Okay.
Yes, I am.
How about now?
Perfect.
No notes? Okay, perfect. All right, let's go quickly through this. So I come from Glendon Campus of York University, which is located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, North America's 4th largest city and the largest city in Canada, also Canada's capital of culture and finance and technology. Our programs at Glendon, we have different clusters of programs. So these aren't the majors themselves. The majors are underneath. So we have human and social sciences, education, languages, cultures and translation, business and economics, government and law, and sciences. So you can get a 4-year honors degree in any of these programs listed underneath the clusters. Remember how I told you about Canadian institutions tend to be large and public? Well, Glendon Campus is unique because even though we are part of York University, which is Canada's 3rd largest university, we're a very small campus, which offers a personalized experience. And I'm going to get into the numbers there. We like to call ourselves a small campus with a big heart. Our campus has about, on average, 2,500 students. York University in total has 55,000 full and part-time students. So only 2,500 on our campus. It's very small. There are high schools in Toronto that have more students than Glendon Campus does. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis? Well, it means that our average class size is 26. So that means you have classes that have a little bit more students, but we have a lot of classes that have a lot less students than that, especially in the upper years. They can get into the single digits, which, you know, when you're talking about making those connections with your professors and your colleagues, that really goes a super long way towards having an extremely immersive academic experience. We have on-campus housing right at Glendon. And in fact, right now we're taking advantage of this year where we don't have many students at all on campus to completely renovate our residences, an $8 million project to completely redo and modernize our student residences. So come September, they are going to be brand spanking new and beautiful. Our hands-on learning is really for your success. So what does that mean by hands-on learning? Well, I told you the class sizes are small, but other than that too, we offer a lot of what's called experiential education. So not only are you taking a degree in a certain discipline like psychology, but you also have tons of opportunity to study psychology, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. For example, Glendon is located just north of Sunnybrook Hospital, one of the most reputable hospitals in the entire world, especially for trauma injuries, brain trauma. So our psychology students actually do internships and placements at Sunnybrook to do clinical research, patient research, a lot of these extremely important things about learning about the brain and how it works and how it functions after a traumatic event and that type of thing. So that's just one of thousands of examples of hands-on learning that you can do to supplement your degree. Because as I say to students, it's not enough now just to graduate with great marks. You have to have some hands-on experiential education to supplement your degree by the time you graduate, because those employers are going to say, okay, you studied great, but what have you done outside of school? So at Glendon, you would definitely have a good answer for that. Depending on what your degree is, you will develop skills in cultural competency, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, leadership, and social intelligence, and communication as well, which are important no matter whether you're in psychology or communications or international studies or business and economics. These are the core skills that you will develop strongly at Glendon and that you will need to succeed professionally. As you may know, Glendon, Canada is a bilingual country. We have 2 official languages, French and English. D'à côté, si vous avez des questions en français, je peux répondre en français aussi dans le chat. Donc, but that'll be the French for now. I'll go back to English. At Glendon, all programs are bilingual programs. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean you have to be fluent in French and English? No, you don't have to have any English or any French in order to study in our programs. You would start at the level that you're at, and if that's 0 level, then you're at 0 level. And no matter if you're in business economics or political science or international studies, you will have some second language skills built into your degree. What does that mean for you? It means that you will have better employment, better pay, better advancement in your professional life after graduation. Even if you have a little bit of skill in a second or third language, you will definitely improve your chances of having a successful career. And also, might I say that we have an extremely robust Hispanic studies program as well. So you can even do a trilingual program in English and French and Hispanic studies in Spanish as well. Also, it opens up the world to you. The more languages you speak or the more open you are to other languages, the more opportunities you have to go global. So very quickly, this is how it breaks down. Depending on your level at the beginning of your degree, everybody who graduates from Glendon graduates with a York University degree in their chosen major with a bilingual citation, okay? So at the very least, you would have the base level bilingual BA or BSc, or at the advanced level, if you become fluently bilingual or you already had a lot of skills in those 2 or 3 languages, you would have a bilingual certificate from York University or a trilingual excellence certificate on top of your bilingual degree. So that's how it ranges. We talked a lot about cost in general. Let me talk about it specifically. So fees for international students, and these are averages, and again in Canadian dollars. So for tuition and course fees, it's about 32,000 Canadian. Books and equipment, the max would be about 1,500, but most students spend around $700 per year on books. Health and dental insurance is mandatory, and for the year it costs about $970 or $870, depending on what options you choose. So at that level, then it's about $34,665. And then you would add your housing on top of that. So your room, there's 8 size options. They range in price. And this is for the full year, $6,000 to $10,000. A meal plan is $3,000 to $5,000. You can live off campus. However, as you can see, it's actually a lot more expensive to live off campus than on campus because Toronto is one of North America's most expensive cities. So the on-campus housing option is definitely the most economically viable. Now, there are a lot of people from the UK, from Europe, from all over the world that have relatives in Toronto. So if you do have relatives in Toronto, by all means, you are not forced to live on campus. And a lot of international students actually stay with their aunts or their cousins or their uncle, or maybe they have an older brother or a parent or something that lives in the Toronto area. That can mean significant savings as well in terms of your tuition and fees. So you're not paying as much in housing costs. So that's something to consider as well. So because I want to give Annalise as much time as possible, I'm going to end it there. We'd love to see you. We're having our international open house next Tuesday, January 26th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Go to yorku.ca/Glendon to find out how you can register for this free event. There's going to be different webinars about Glendon, about York, about our different programs. I'm going to be hosting some too, if you haven't gotten sick of my voice already. You can email us at liaison@glendon.yorku.ca for any questions you might have. There's also the contact information at my booth. We're also on Instagram at Glendon Campus. You can participate in our weekly drop-ins and webinars. If you go to our website, you can register for those as well. So that's it for the Glendon portion. And so I'll hand it over to Anna Louisa to talk about her school.
Thank you very, very much, Ryan. Also fantastic. We do highly recommend anybody that's interested in Canada, please definitely go see his booth, definitely go speak to him. I tell all my students, it is not the school that makes the student, it is the student that makes the school. And what I mean by this is that universities will be the best fit for you. As much as I would love you to come to St. Francis College, if it's going to be the best fit for you. And also, I think it's going to be a best fit for a lot of different students. So I'm going to start off a little bit of explaining what we are, who we are as an institution. One thing that I think sets St. Francis College apart from the rest, or not even apart from the rest, is something that I like to advocate for, is that we care about you. And not a lot of institutions do. And I say this as somebody who was recently a student, who's been in different student types in private, public, different types of universities. something that I know for me that helped me out, and at one point I was an international student studying in Spain, something that for me that I took into very big consideration was, how will a school help me? What are resources that I have available for me? What is the kind of community that I'm going to be in? And is that a good fit for me in my personal and professional career? So that being said, I'm going to share a little bit of what St. Francis College looks like to get some kind of idea in this regard. Let me open this up really bigly. I know that we're on the current old presentation. Here we go. Can we all see this? Ryan, can I get a yes?
You can have your yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So I don't want to go too far because I know we have a few minutes left, but I do want to say 3 things that St. Francis College is built on: our 3 pillars of dream, serve, and achieve. We want you to dream big, serve yourself and your community, and achieve all the goals that you have possible. And we want to help you with that. Just some stats, an idea about the school. We are a Franciscan university, so if being a part of a faith-based institution is important to you, by all means come to us. But this is to also say you do not have to be religious or faith-based to come. All this means is that our traditions are rooted in a Franciscan philosophy of wanting to, again, serve yourself and serve your community. We're founded in 1859, and while we are a private school, we offer tuition at a public school rate, meaning that we're one of the more affordable private school options in New York City. We also recently have our residence halls completely renovated. This is the first time students have lived in them. I personally think they're beautiful, and we're located in the Brooklyn Heights area. We also offer 70 different undergraduate programs and majors. We also have an honors program. We have small classroom sizes, which I think is pivotal to learning. The student to faculty ratio is about 16:1, where our average classroom size is 15 to 18 students in a singular classroom, meaning that your professors are going to know you. As soon as you walk through the doors, we know you, we know your name, we know your story. As an international student, I think that's especially important because you're coming into a new place. You're learning new friends, you're learning new community members and things like that. We want to know you and know that you have resources here available. We're also an NCAA, Division I sports team, like I mentioned previously, with 21 sports that we compete at the Division I level. These are some rankings. I'm not going into it too much. What I do want to share is a little bit of what our neighborhood is like. We are about a 3-minute, truly, subway ride from Lower Manhattan. I tell all my students, if you've seen any movie of New York, we're not in that big area. We're a little bit out of it, meaning that you have the entire city at your disposal. Also, our campus is located, like I said, in Brooklyn Heights. We have a very, very thriving student life where we have sports teams available. We have student activities, clubs, fair. We have a very thriving as well international student population with a lot of students from Serbia, which is a very interesting place to have students from. We have a lot of international students from different regions of Europe, Latin and South America, and the Caribbean. So you'll be a part of a community that is global. We also have a specific office called SFC International that's specifically dedicated for international students. If you're somebody that's interested in the medical or media fields, we also have state-of-the-art labs. Additionally, we're really, really focused on business. We have very big connections with Wall Street. We're going to go into that in terms of internships and post-work opportunities. Like I said, our residence halls are completely renovated and new. Our personal education is a touch that we are really, really proud of. I do want to go into a little bit more at the end. This is just some things that I want to not skip over, but I know with our limited time, some more information might be more pertinent to you. Some degrees and programs, I like to tell my students, you don't have to know exactly what you're going to study. Have an idea. We also have a lot of different options for you to choose from. But as we're wrapping up, I kind of want to go to the end of contact information. Admissions requirements, I'll read through briefly, is going to be translated and evaluated transcripts, a free application, you can do so on our portal, and then additionally, proof of English proficiency, unless you come from an English-speaking regions. Any questions that you have, email me, call me, send me a message on WhatsApp. I have constant groups with my students in which we get on Zoom calls. You're able to meet everybody. But again, my name is Ana Luisa Teodoro. You can email me at ateodoro@sfc.edu. All of my contact information is on my booth. Please come and say hello. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about this. But once again, I'm going to end sharing this and kind of leave off with thank you for your time, your energy, and your effort. Ryan, if you want to jump on too. Another thing too, as an international student, I like to also share just some encouragement. I know it's hard. It's hard to apply for schools. It's hard to apply for schools as a domestic student. Be aware, sometimes you might get a rejection letter. That's okay. You're going to get through it. We're here to help you out. Also, if you're ever concerned about language, I like to say all the time, your accent or your learning English is a sign that you are a global student that has a lot to offer. You should never feel embarrassed about that, and that should never stop you or deter you from applying for school. We want you here. Ryan wants you at his university. I want you at my university. We want you because we know the value that you have for our institutions and also the value that you want to gain from education. So I want to thank Ryan. Thank you for your time, your energy, your effort. Marco, thank you for all the help that you provide us with in Worldwide College Tours. Ryan, anything you want to close off on?
No, just again, just to reiterate, there's a lot of similarities between studying in the U.S. and studying in Canada, but there are a lot of differences as well. So you just always want to, keep that in mind. And it's really about choosing what's the right fit for you, right? I don't think either of us would want a student to come to one of our schools and be unhappy about it, right? We want you to be like a super enthusiastic and engaged student. So take your time to make the right choice for you because it works for everybody.
And that being said, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here. I know that we're ending it up. Thank you, Marco. Yeah. And with that, stay well, stay safe, wear your masks, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
And come visit our booth.
Visit our booth. Bye, everyone.